You're live, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all. Why don't we call the roll, please?
Ms. Avara is absent. Superintendent Chaudhry is absent, but he did let us know that he would be coming in a little bit late, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Secretary Churchill.
Present. Good morning.
Ms. Everhart.
Present.
Mr. Gibbons.
Present.
Ms. Lala is absent. Mr. Lombardo.
Present.
And Secretary McCord is absent, but also let us know that he would be coming in late. And finally, Chair Casemeyer.
here.
You have
Okay.
a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Bob, do we have any revisions to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, no revisions,
Any public comment today?
no public comment.
Okay. How about correspondence?
Yes, we have a letter, and then I wanted to make a comment on a response letter to the governor. The letter that we received was from Howard County. In essence, they were concerned that we had a 4 million minimum value of projects under the Built to Learn program. And we talked about this previously in an IAC meeting. Because of the logistics required to move a project along, even small projects take as much as larger projects. And when you add in the bonding factor of having to manage that, it was determined with MSA and IAC staff together that 4 million should be the lower end of those projects. However, that was his concern. I answered it back. That letter came in on the September 2nd. I answered back on the 23rd that the 4 million could be made up of bundled projects, and gave a list of projects that they might consider bundling together to get to the 4 million within a single school, or similar types of projects across multiple schools. And we've been doing this. This is not something new. We've been doing this in the CIP program, because the more bundled you can make a project, the bigger you can make a project. Again, the logistics are that it takes less of a percentage to manage and deliver the project. So we offered that to him. I did not hear back on that. So I believe it's a resolved issue. We did make sure that everybody understands that we had that type of information was on the frequently answered questions and asked and answered questions on our website. We are going to send a letter out to all of the county executives so that they're aware of that information being available to them if they ever have questions. Mr. Chair, I had another a letter came from the governor. We talked about at the last IAC meeting with concerns on ventilation and HVAC in schools. We had previously responded with the ventilation response. I wanted to break it into two. There's really separate issues. The ventilation issue in summary was that.
So what did the governor ask us for to begin with?
Yeah, he sent in his letter came to us on, let's see.
Whatever, but what did he want?
He wanted a report. We had to publish a report and provide him with a report. Letter came to myself and also Superintendent Chaudhry. And he wanted a report on ventilation and HVAC. He was concerned with the school closures. So we responded first with the ventilation related to COVID, I do believe. And the ventilation was overall pretty darn good throughout the state. We still need to keep an eye on maintenance. Maintenance is the most important thing. If we just simply keep up the systems that we have, we can provide the fresh air. We gave 1,200 parts per billion as the threshold to achieve. It's a standard that works. And we just need to keep going forward and keep our ventilation systems operating as they should. Good maintenance is hugely important. The HVAC report, we published that and sent it to the governor on October the 8th. And in that report, it summarized where we've been and where we're going. It had mentioned Baltimore City schools, and that was a concern. And there were over 30 schools that he was aware of that had HVAC problems. So we went back and recaptured everything. And actually in 2017, there were just within Baltimore City, there were 75 schools that were without air conditioning. Today, there are only 8 that have not been addressed by all the funding sources, including the 15 million that we report on monthly. We'll do it at the end of this meeting. And of that 8, 4 we believe are eligible for funding this cycle, the CIP cycle, either from the CIP or Built to Learn. There are 4 schools that we don't have projects being requested for. We believe those might be schools that are either not owned by the city, or they're planning on dispose or otherwise have another use for them. So it's really getting down. Those 8 were of 15 total in the state. The other 7 are at Garrett County that don't need the air conditioning because they have a climate that doesn't require it. So that's where we sit today, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any questions about the HVAC or ventilation? Okay.
I did provide that report to everybody. I thought I'd send it out a week ago. My mistake. I apologize. So I sent that report out as well as the previous ventilation report and the letter from the governor, so all the members have it. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Consent agenda. Approval of September 9th minutes. Any corrections to the minutes? Here, a motion that we approve the minutes. Thank you, David.
Moved.
Second.
Seconded.
All in favor, we accept the minutes, September 9th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Bob, anything else?
On the
And then-
consent agenda, no, we can bundle these together. They're common items that include contract awards, the project closeouts, some previous Built to Learn allocations that you had approved that we have corrected some technical changes to make them more in line with the projects, but there's no material changes as such. And then property easements, and we could break these out separately or take them together, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone have any questions on the consent agenda items? Do I hear a motion we accept them?
I move that we
So
accept.
moved. And a second. Any more discussion on the consent agenda? All in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Welcome, Superintendent. We just, by the way, Bob reviewed the response to the governor's request for a report on ventilation and air conditioning, and he has sent that to you, I think, today. You should be getting it. Okay. Property disposition, Harford County. Michael, morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Occasionally, we do get property items that are more of a kind of a cleanup in nature, things that have been around for a while that the LEAs request that the IAC approve, and that is our item this morning up in Harford County. Working with public schools for a couple months here on this issue here that you see today, and that is regarding a transfer and disposal of the Lewis Lane parcel. So the MDOT, Maryland Department of Transportation, has been working to improve the Susquehanna River Rail Bridge between Havre de Grace and the town of Perryville. As part of the planning of alternative alignments, it was determined that the preferred alternative would have permanent impacts to the Havre de Grace Middle School's athletic fields. So to mitigate the impacts, the parties determined that the best course of action was for Amtrak to acquire a portion of the land through fee simple acquisition following a property transfer to the Harford County government. Future easements may also be required, and if they are, they will come back through the IAC. In this case, the Harford County Public Schools have been working with MDOT and Amtrak on this issue since 2016, and upon the approval, the Board of Education will move forward with the transfer and coordinate with Harford County government on the future disposition to Amtrak.
Okay.
So I can answer any questions, or we
Any
can read the
questions?
motion.
You want to make a motion, please? Michael?
Yes, the motion here is, yes.
Go ahead.
The motion is to approve the transfer and disposal as surplus property by the Harford County Board of Education of a 1.814 acre parcel at 401 Lewis Lane in Havre de Grace, Maryland. known as parcel number 1. Also tax map 602, a portion of parcel 2276, adjacent to Havre de Grace Middle School to the Hartford County government for future disposition to Amtrak to become part of the Susquehanna River Rail Bridge realignment project.
Do I hear a motion in a second?
So moved.
Okay, a second, good enough. Any more questions about this motion? Any more discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Washington County Western Heights roof replacement contract cancellation. Ben,
Good morning.
morning.
I'm here to present the Western Heights Middle School roof contract termination motion. For a little bit of background information, on April 6, 2021, the Washington County Public Schools Board of Education approved a contract between Washington County Public Schools and D Project Incorporated, the contractor, in the amount of $1,333,000 for the systematic renovation roof project at Western Heights Middle School. The contract was executed by both parties on April 15th, 2021. On May 3rd of that year, D Project, the contractor, informed WCPS of supply chain issues and requested relief from the contract date. Washington County Public Schools then agreed to split the project into 2 phases. Phase 1 to be completed summer of 21 and phase 2 to be completed summer of 22. Later that month, on May 27th, the IAC approved the contract between Washington County Public Schools and D Project. In early July, the contractor then informed Washington County Public Schools that suppliers were not honoring agreed upon pricing and they could no longer meet the schedule of the first phase of the project at the contracted price. Washington County Public Schools decided their best course of action was to terminate the contract for convenience, pay the contractor for administrative costs incurred, around $46,000, and then competitively rebid the project again at a later date. IAC staff met with Washington County Public Schools and recommended that they advise the contractor to reduce the administrative fees or the contractor's bond bid would be executed. This recommendation was not followed. The Washington County Public Schools Board of Education met on August 3rd, 21 and voted to rescind the contract and pay all administrative costs presented from the contractor. IAC staff was notified of this action through correspondence on August 26th, 2021, and Washington County Public Schools advised that they intend to rebid this project at a later date. The IAC staff recommends the IAC approval of the termination of this contract.
Mr. Chair, one valid point is that those are local dollars and not state dollars that they used in their settlement.
Any questions about this situation? Mr. Lombardo.
Mr. Chair, I just would comment that it seems that the staff's concerns about the administrative costs without knowing any of the details seems somewhat valid. $46,000 for a couple of weeks of not doing anything other than saying, hey, we can't get the materials that we need. It seems excessive. I don't know whether IAC has any standing to take further action or not, or simply say, yeah, okay, it's your money, go ahead. I would support the staff's concern that the administrative costs seem high.
I would agree. So if it had been state money, would we have probably had a different position, Ben? I mean, have we had a history of this?
Yes, we would have had a different position.
So is there any history of this situation occurring? I mean, in other counties, I don't know, I don't know. Does this happen frequently?
We've seen it more than once. And that there is certainly a desire to avoid public light of disagreements, and sometimes paying out to a contractor to avoid that is, I think, an easy solution. It often comes with the backing of their legal counsel. It's always
Just seems weird, being the contractor is the one who fundamentally said they were unable to perform because of supply shortage, that
Agreed.
the county ended up paying them when they're the ones that said they couldn't perform.
And staff's viewpoint is we just have too many needs. We don't have enough resources, and to not have every dollar count towards helping children is seems like it's worth more of a battle than we're getting in some cases.
Any more comments about the situation? Mr. Gibbons?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are they exercising, I mean, if we have a enforceable contract, is this a force majeure thing that they're triggering? How are they getting away with just saying, I know we agreed to do this, but we just can't do it?
Brett, you had a lot of direct conversations with the county. Could you answer that?
Absolutely. So the local position is a force majeure situation, and they've requested us to actually look into it as well. And we reviewed it, and we do not see it as a force majeure situation. So it is differing of opinions, and being that it's a local funded project and there is no state money involved in this settlement, we have no position. I do not believe.
No standing.
And are we seeing this, Bob, are we seeing this more often? I know that there's the supply chain issue. In particular, roofing materials are hard to come by. Are we seeing this more often right now?
I wouldn't say that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that it is going to increase. We're beginning to see it, but we've seen it even before the current position, this current problems that we've had with supply chain delivery.
But a lot of projects are being resequenced due to supply issues, and schedules are being blown out. And the pandemic is construction materials are very scarce right now.
We'll work with we will work with LEAs and with and of course the LEAs with the contractors to find a solution. In this case, it looked like there was not a solution, and that's too bad. I think we hope when they rebid it, they can get a good price. But when you've got somebody that has agreed with a bid bond to deliver the project, the owner has leverage.
So,
But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, but this is it's a local decision. It's not an IAC decision.
That's correct. It's a local decision. We are not on those contracts.
so why do we have a role? Go ahead.
What is our role in voting to
Yeah.
approve this then?
As far as approving the rescission of this contract,
Yes. It seems to me that the contractor would be subject to damages if we rebid it and we get worse pricing. That's from a private sector perspective. And Dick, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. But if we have no role in this, I understand.
Is just really quickly, is the vote to affirm what they're doing, or because in the letter they're requesting that they're able to reserve the SIP dollars, right, the million and change for the future rebid? So are we basically voting to affirm the reservation for the future rebid, or are we just affirming a local decision that's already been made? That's what I'm also trying to get clarity on. Are we like by saying yes, do we basically say, go ahead and you can reserve the million and change from the SIP for the future rebid? Is that what we're agreeing to as a body here? That's what I'm thinking. But again,
Superintendent Chaudhary, those are a very, very good question. It's really two parts, and they are tied. We approve contracts. We look at the contracts and we approve them before those dollars that the IAC has allocated can be expended. You had already approved this contract. So the request now is to rescind that approval, rescind that you'd approved it, say it's not approved anymore, let it fall back, and then those dollars will revert for future use by the county.
So,
But to be clear, Bob, what I hear is that the dollars to pay the contractor are local dollars, and yet state funding is involved in this project. So I'm unclear
Okay.
about the distinction.
The project is what you had approved is a project that combined both state dollars and local dollars. What they spent on the settlement were local dollars only. The contract they are asking to rescind would relieve the obligation of the state on that contract that you had already made, that would go back into their reserve to use on another project.
Or even on this project.
Or even on this project, that's correct.
But our action in effect relieves the state of the obligation to fund this contract.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess my only objection here is that, you know, if material costs went down, I don't think that the IAC or the local LEA would be asking to terminate the contract because material costs were down.
Yeah.
And so, again, I don't know the details of the legal documents that were signed, but I think that we ought to be careful that if it's not a force majeure thing, and it's your standard market risk, that letting someone out of a contract, which we are going to end up likely paying more for, I don't quite understand why we allow that to happen.
What are the consequences if we don't approve of this motion?
I don't know the answer to that. I would have to research it and get back to you.
Do we have counsel on? Could
We
they
do.
weigh in on anything?
Elliot, do you have an opinion?
Can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, it must have been the headphone. We would have to dig more into what were the facts behind the decision that was made and what the local board decided. I imagine it's more complex than just set out in their letter. They might have also taken into account what the cost would have been on defending an action or claims. So as Bob said, we would have to dig more deeply into it. But my sense is if we would have to determine what would be the consequence if the board does not approve the rescission of the contract, and what would then happen, because it doesn't sound like they're going to move forward with the contract as it is. So we would have to dig more deeply into that.
Possibly the dollars would just sit there. This is a speculation. The dollars would sit there. They would clock out at 2 years, and then they would revert to the general fund to be allocated to any county. But that is one foreseeable consequence.
So is
We'd
there
have to
is there any
study it.
emergency? We have to time this. We have to do this today. Vote on
Mr.
this
Chair,
issue?
no.
It seemed to me that we should understand really what we're doing here in terms of establishing any kind of what's the word I'm trying to think of, the legal issue of establishing some kind of ongoing precedent. Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, you got me. Anyway, I think we should just hold it and get a better understanding of what we're doing. Does anybody else feel any differently? Just
I agree, Mr. Chair. I think that the issue is precedent. I mean, I think we may see this more and more often. So over the next 12 months, I can tell you that from our business, and lots of construction issues are coming up. It's all supply chain related, but those things are negotiated and factored into the pricing. So my assumption is that the contractor is taking a position that this is a force majeure event. And again, you're getting into technical legal stuff there.
So is there any objection to holding this till next month and we understand the situation better? We need to vote on this, Elliot? Or can we? I can't hear you.
No, you can just defer it until a later
Okay.
time.
Why don't we wait till next month and get a better handle on the implications of if we don't approve this motion? And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we can invite the LEA to come to the meeting as well.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, the FY21 maintenance report, Alex.
Good morning, Mr.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Good to see you.
Thank you. You too.
In your most recent meeting during our presentation of the results of the IAC's FY 2021 maintenance effectiveness assessments, you asked some questions to which we promised responses, and you requested additional information specifically regarding the 36% of assessed schools that receive failing ratings in the area of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, or HVAC systems. So today, Scott and I are pleased to be here to present those responses and information and to answer any further questions you might have on the subject. The information we're presenting today is on page 32 of your agenda. Because it's an informational item, no motion is proposed. As we noted in last month's presentation, the IAC's Maintenance Effectiveness Assessment, or MEA, rates maintenance on each of 21 major building systems as well as 4 categories related to maintenance management. One of these systems is the HVAC system. Starting on page 32 in your agenda, we've reprinted the section of the assessment rubric that lists the criteria for each rating as they apply to HVAC systems. To paraphrase, the rubric states that an HVAC system should receive a rating of not adequate if it is not functioning as intended, or if there's evidence of issues requiring significant repairs. In contrast, an HVAC system should receive a rating of poor if it is non-functional or unsafe to operate, or if there's evidence of issues requiring extensive repairs or replacement. Each of these 2 ratings is considered to be a failing rating. In addition, a minor or major deficiency can be assessed if the HVAC system poses a potential or immediate threat to the life, safety, or health of occupants, to the delivery of educational programs or services, or to the expected lifespan of the facility. A deficiency is often applied when an assessor finds an issue that is consequential and needs quick remediation, and/or is localized and is not sufficiently widespread in the facility to support a lower rating for the entire building system. Any major or minor deficiency that's not acceptably remediated and that remains on the report for the school after it's finalized also counts as a failing rating, even if the overall rating for the system was adequate or better. So now I'd like to ask Scott to discuss the fiscal year 2021 findings on HVAC systems.
Thank you, Alex. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
As reported in the IAC's fiscal year 2021 report on its maintenance effectiveness assessments, 97 schools, or 36% of the schools assessed, received failing ratings, which would be not adequate, poor, or a minor deficiency for HVAC systems. Starting on page 33 in your agenda is a table showing the failing ratings and deficiencies by LEA. At the bottom of the table, you will see that 37 schools received a rating of not adequate for HVAC, 2 received a rating of poor, and 72 received a minor deficiency, either separate from or in addition to their rating. Note that where a school received both a minor deficiency and a poor or not adequate rating, it is only counted once. No school received a major deficiency for HVAC that was not acceptably remediated within the time period allowed. This means that by August of this year, to our knowledge, no school assessed during fiscal year 2021 was left with an HVAC system that posed an immediate threat to the life, safety, or health of building occupants, or to the expected lifespan of the facility. However, there were 72 unremediated minor deficiencies spanning 16 out of the 24 LEAs. In other words, 16 LEAs had at least one school in which the HVAC system is just a step or two away from causing a serious problem. The 72 minor deficiencies associated with HVAC systems constitute around 7% of the 974 minor and 5 major deficiencies assessed. What in these schools gave rise to the failing ratings? First, let's take a look at some representative examples of issues that gave rise to ratings of not adequate. Then we will take a look at issues that gave a rise to the 2 ratings of poor. And finally, we will take a look at some representative examples of issues that gave rise to the unremediated minor deficiencies that we assessed in HVAC. Then we'll be happy to stand for any additional questions you may have. It is not our intention here to shame any specific school district or school, but instead only to point out the conditions that some students are being subjected to and to raise the awareness of what's not being done in maintenance that needs to be done. For this reason, I will not mention school names in citing these examples. In looking at some examples of schools that received ratings of not adequate, we see findings such as the following. Numerous classroom univents were not operable, and the other ones that did not work do not have adequate controls. That do work do not have adequate controls to maintain a consistent classroom temperature. This is an example of the system not functioning as it is intended. At the time of the assessment, there were 46 open work orders for HVAC repairs or preventive maintenance dating back to July of 2019. This is evidence of inconsistent maintenance practices, which is arguably a substandard which could have equaled poor. And one exhaust fan on the roof was missing a cover. The failed belt needed to be replaced and then tested for operation. System not functioning as intended. In looking at the two schools that received poor ratings, we see findings such as the following. A significant number of univents had damaged cabinets, vents, and toggle controls. Clogged drain pans were leaking, which has caused damage to floors and ceilings below in numerous locations. Numerous thermostats were damaged with missing covers that will require repair. A damaged line set was observed on a Mitsubishi unit on the roof. An older model exhaust fan was damaged from reported vandalism on the roof across from the gym door roof access area. Multiple classrooms and offices have window AC units installed with damage, missing covers, and or dirty filters. To that, the LEA reported that maintenance division performs no maintenance on these units because it is the responsibility given to the school administration. Numerous areas in the facility had condensation issues. These issues.
I'm sorry. Could you go back and say that again about
the multiple classrooms?
Administrative.
Whose responsibility it is?
So what was reported to us while on site is the LEA indicated that maintenance does not handle these window air units, that when they are put in, it's because the administration has allowed them to be put in and they're not aware of them, so they're not maintained.
Okay.
Continue,
sorry,
sir. Sure,
yes, sir.
No worries. Numerous areas in the facility had condensation issues, and these issues collectively constitute ample evidence of issues requiring extensive repairs or replacement, as well as evidence of consistently substandard maintenance practices. And as far as minor deficiencies, when we look at some examples of schools that received minor deficiencies, we found findings such as the following. The coils and filters were dirty on 3 rooftop units located above the pre-kindergarten classrooms. The filters were dated 3/29/2018. These are potential threats to the life, safety, and health of occupants due to particulates and potential mold spores in the building's air plus added strain on the HVAC system that may cause reduce in its lifespan. There were cracked and loose drive belts in multiple exhaust fans above the gymnasium and multiple other rooms, some making a loud noise, cracked or loose drive belts on inline duct booster fans inside the pool's ventilation ductwork, along with a collapsed air filter, and no work orders were identified. And these all equal potential threat to health of occupants to have insufficient ventilation in a gym, pool, or other spaces, as well as potential threat to other indoor systems in the pool area if lack of ventilation allows for excessive humidity, mold, and rust in the spaces. These are representative examples of issues the IAC's assessors found that generated failing ratings, but there are many more we can cite. Now we are happy to stand for any additional questions you may have on this topic.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
before we go to the questions, could you circle back to page 34, issues causing failing ratings? I think it's always important to talk about root cause.
Yeah, go ahead. Who do you
Alex or
Absolutely.
Alex or
So-
Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've listed here in the agenda key issues causing the failing ratings. And we've really grouped them into three major categories here that are significant. One is a large amount of equipment that is aged such that it requires increased levels of maintenance at a higher cost than when during the expected lifespan.
And our latest assessment demonstrates that, right? We've now completed a facility condition index of all the schools in the state, and we can look specifically at HVAC. And we have seen that, in fact, most of the HVAC systems are past half their expected life. Thank you.
Certainly. And a second issue is there is not enough staffing to perform the needed maintenance on the systems that are in place. LEA budget figures suggest that in some or many cases, overall maintenance department resources, meaning the staffing and the funding for materials and contracted support, are insufficient to support the needed maintenance work. And this is why our new comprehensive maintenance plan, which LEAs are submitting this week, asks for this information from each LEA so we can better understand what the resource gaps might be from LEA to LEA. We know from the basic budget numbers available on each LEA's public documents that LEA maintenance budget is compared with industry standards shows a resource gap. And LEAs clearly have more facility square footage than they can maintain with the existing budgets and staffing levels. And finally, the third key point listed here is at the bottom of page 34 is failure by many LEAs to fully utilize their computerized maintenance management systems to ensure that needed preventive, routine, and corrective maintenance is performed on the HVAC systems. And we saw this coming up absolutely widespread.
Yeah. And so whenever, and I think everybody knows this from owning cars or anything else, when you get past 60% of the expected life, your maintenance starts to increase. Your failures increase. Then you get to 70, it goes way up, 80, it goes way, way up. And so staffing and the number of people that it takes is related to the age of the equipment. So it being maintainable is a factor of age. So if you have age systems, you may need more people to work on those systems in order to keep them up and operating as they must. The CMMS system allows that match to be able to shift your resources and know and report out. So it's why we've come a long way. We have some LEAs that are leading the pack in that area, and we have a lot of others that are running fast to catch up, but everybody seems engaged. And Alex and Scott's template for the CMMS system so that the reporting starts, what are your resources available, can begin to match up and align with what's reported out of their CMMS system. Thank you.
Any questions about this report? Secretary Churchill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bob, I have two questions. First, from a standpoint of a CMMS system, which of course everyone advocates for, please confirm that all LEAs have a modern CMMS system in place, or one that is functioning, that is in alignment with our tool.
There are only a couple that may not align. Almost all of them are using the same system throughout the state. They're purchasing it independently. Something that we've begun to investigate at what the options are of maybe purchasing it at a state level to get better pricing, because I think that sometimes the smaller ones get squeezed on that pricing. But I'd like to defer that answer back over to Scott. You're working with them one-on-one and what they're able to report out. But I do want to frame it by saying what a system can do and what it's being utilized to do are two different things. Scott?
Thank you, Bob. I think that's the key component right there, Mr. Churchill. They all have a fairly modern CMMS system, and they are all using it to what they believe is the best of their capabilities. It may not be the right direction, but it's what they're doing now. A lot of them are newly involved in it over the last 2 years. So there's some ebbs and flow to that, right? It's going to take them some time and some experimenting to get it done. What I'm finding is the biggest component to it is that although they have the systems, most of their assets are not built into the systems and receiving auto-populated work orders for PM. That's where I'm finding the big hiccup. So they don't remember, they're still using the old whiteboard on the wall to, oh, it's time to go change the oil. So that's what we're trying to get them towards.
And the report on
Is-
that's tough, if I can, is the work order aging report. If we have automatically created preventive maintenance work orders and they can't do them, that should not be embarrassing. That should be the root of the cause. Okay, why can't we? And start to drill in whether we need more resources, whether we need to replace the equipment. It's just hugely valuable information that is not being fully utilized.
Does LEAs have a percentage of their budget for maintenance?
It varies. It varies widely across LEAs. There is no minimum standard or floor set here in Maryland.
And budget is not always expenditure, Mr. Chair.
Well, I know we got to begin with something. I understand. But what is the standard for
So
maintenance?
the basic industry standard is to put around 3% of the current replacement value of the facility annually into maintenance and operations, and additional amount into capital maintenance would be replacing systems as they wear out. In addition to that, some states have looked at mandating a portion of operating budgets to go into maintenance and operations that is supposed to cover those costs. And there are ways to do that. At this time, of course, we have varying resource levels at different LEAs and a local control tradition that has been made this not an area that the IAC has been directly involved in.
Mr. Sharon, you have a question? Elliot?
Go ahead.
Mr. Superintendent, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, the other thing to remember in all of this is there's also deferred maintenance costs that all districts have, especially large systems that are up in the millions. I mean, I can tell you, just to catch up, I mean, we would have to do multiple super bonds in Texas. And even then so that's another element in all of this, knowing what their deferred maintenance costs, because I bet that's up really, really high. One question that I do have is on where you said a large amount of the equipment is aged. Do we know, or do you have the data broken down of the 39 that were not adequate and poor? What percentage of those are aged? Like, do you have that number? Can you break it up that way? I just would be curious if that's more than 50% of those 39 or 90%. I mean, because that says something as well too.
Superintendent, we do have the information. We haven't gone and done that analysis.
Okay.
This year going forward, however, every time we go to visit an LEA, we will bring that facility condition index information, because we want to understand and align what the expectations are with the resources that are there. Not only that, but we've also, with the assessment, kept track of systems that have exceeded their expected life, probably because of good maintenance or good purchase decisions. And we will publish that each time we go out to an LEA to review that particular system and the building. On the deferred maintenance portion, I'd just like to comment that the states believe that the LEAs, rather, the state of Maryland, believe that their deferred maintenance is about $26 billion. That's self-reported. We don't have an exact number on that, but it's pretty close to that whenever we look at it. You can't take care of that all at once. So you have to have a plan. What are the highest priorities? Fix those first, the ones that have the highest return on investment to help the kids in the space, and then move to the next one. So this is where our facility maintenance assessment reporting, what is broken, what do you need to focus on, aligns very well with our statewide facility assessment, so that just as you're suggesting, we can look at those ages and the problems and begin to hone in on what the highest needs are, so that we can fix the deferred maintenance needs that affect the classroom most, fix them first.
Got it.
Elliot, you have a hand up in your space. Do you have a question or just a mistake?
No, I did not, and I don't.
Oh, now it's
I
Dick
didn't-
Lombardo. Mr.
Oh,
Lombardo?
okay.
Mr. Lombardo, you have a question? Okay, there's a hand up and you're Secretary McCord.
Yes, I have one. This, Alex and Scott, thanks for your work. Appreciate you staying on top of it. We have this issue that we're talking about at the moment is HVAC issues in schools with heating and air conditioning. And that's not the same thing that's been in the public eye about schools without air conditioning, correct?
Correct. We are looking at holistically the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems in this maintenance effectiveness assessment. And we want to look at this is not a condition assessment. Is there a system? Is it working? This is how effective is the maintenance on those systems? Are the systems in each school getting the maintenance that they need to maintain the learning environments in a condition necessary for good teaching and learning and comfortable students and staff?
Right. And how many schools do we have? I mean, we assessed 268 this past time, but
Right.
how many schools do we have?
1,400 schools statewide. And we look to do about 1/5 of all the schools each year in this maintenance assessment with the staffing that we have. That's pretty much max we can manage. But that gives us a very good sample set in each school district to be able to get a handle on what's happening with the maintenance for that district. And in the districts that have a large number of schools in different regions, we're working now with each LEA to offer selecting the schools across their different regions so that we can help them see how the level of maintenance effectiveness in their different regions if they're served by different groups or depots, for example.
No, I very much appreciate the work and the way you're going about it. That's not my point at all here. My point at all is we have 1,400 schools, and then we hear about schools that do not have air conditioning, and then we have a program of checking even the schools that do have air conditioning, and because we check the HVAC systems in a methodical way, as many as we can all the time. So those issues are being caught too. So and we're making the recommendations to the LEA. So just wanted to put that in the context of the larger thing, because we get the little headline here and there, and people don't understand that we've been on this project of making sure that we make assessments and we make a really good assessment, and the way we go about making the assessments. The whole HVAC system is something that always gets looked at. So thank you for your work and keep it up. Thank you.
Our privilege. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Good.
Yes.
I know you were running a little bit late, but and I can catch up to you after the meeting, but the air conditioning report to the governor, we had 75 schools in 2017 without AC operating properly. We're now down to 15. 7 of those are in Garrett. They don't need air conditioning. 8 are in Baltimore City. 4 of them we believe are going to get awarded this year. That only leaves 4 that may not be in buildings that are owned or that they want to continue with. So we're really whittling it down. But very important in that report ties directly here is that they won't keep running. The facilities are not set and forget assets. They require constant tending to keep up and going. And that's why this discussion on maintenance is so important. Thank you.
Any other questions on the maintenance report? Ms. Everhart.
Yes. When did we start this maintenance assessment of the 1,400 schools? Has that been the past decade, or is this something that this cycle is just starting now?
Alex?
Mr. Chair, the IAC has been conducting these assessments since 2007. Prior to that, going back into the 1980s, DGS conducted the maintenance inspections. So yes, they're very long standing, and this year is the first year of the new, very much revamped and refined maintenance effectiveness assessment that we reported to you in the annual report last month.
And we've been trying to do every school every 5 years?
That has been the goal, and there have been sub areas of focus along with that. But because of our staffing levels capacity, we can do, we think, about 1/5 every year. And whereas in the past, we had tried to hit schools such that they didn't go beyond 5 or 6 years before being assessed. And now we are focusing more on essentially getting the most valid sample set we can for each LEA and assisting them in this technical assistance with the information. And so it may be that in a given LEA, we might assess a school more frequently, or occasionally there may be a school that might go a couple more years in order to get them the most useful information.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the HVAC project status. Jamie?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Casemeyer and members of the commission. It is good to see you. I'm before you to deliver. Excuse me?
No, go ahead.
Great. I'm here before you to deliver item 5, an informational item, and that is the extra $15 million for HVAC in Baltimore City project status report. Item 5 can be found on page 36 of your agenda. With regard to project status as of September 29, 2021, we have 16 of the 19 projects are operational, 2 are under construction, and 1 is still in design. Of the 3 projects that are not yet operational, 1 is behind less than 2 months, and 2 are behind more than 2 months. Of those 2, Thomas Johnson, number 84, is behind due to a supply chain issue. They are waiting for air handler units. And Callaway Elementary, number 251, as you may remember, was delayed in order to make sure the other projects could be completed with the dollars available. Once in design, some equipment failure inspired the city to reevaluate the scope, and they have decided to expand the scope. And so that is the reason why that facility is still in design. Moving on to contract status as of September 29th also, 15 million of the $15 million have been allocated. That is 100%. 13.5 million of 15 million has been contracted. That is 90%. And 9.8 million has been expended. That is 65%. I'd like to make one quick note on local support. The IAC established a local cost share for this program of 0% in order to meet the spirit of the legislation. However, in order to complete and finish these projects, Baltimore City has committed an additional $3.1 million to date, which means the actual local cost share to date is about 19%. And with the expanded scope of Callaway Elementary, I would anticipate that the local cost share at the end of the program will be 20 to 25%. That represents a significant additional commitment of time and local capital in order to keep schools off or keep them from going on the list of schools that could close due to lack of heating or air conditioning. That concludes my report. I'll stand for questions.
Questions? Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, let's move along. IAC programs and funding factors. Cassandra?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I am sharing some slides. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. We prepared this presentation at the request of the chair, both as a refresher for members, but also for the public. You all know that all of our meetings are live streamed and the recordings are archived and available on our website essentially forever. Our viewership continues to increase. And because the IAC has so many programs with various complexities and nuances, we wanted to do a brief presentation today on each of those programs. I do want to remind everyone that information for each program is available on our new website that we launched last December, which is mdschoolconstruction.org. So this presentation starts on page 39 of your agenda for those of you that are following along that way. And I'm also going to share my slides on the screen. So this is just a list of the IAC's active programs, and we're going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail. But before we start talking about the programs, I want to talk a little bit about how the IAC determines which projects, project components or amounts are eligible for state funding in some, but not all of our programs. In a moment, I'll go through the formula used to determine the funding, but first I want to note that the formula that I'm going to talk about in the next several slides is for new replacement and renovation projects. And regardless of the amount that is eligible, we adjust based upon actual contracts. Some project types like systemics or capital maintenance projects or limited renovation projects are based on estimates of actual costs. They don't use this formula. So I just want to remind everyone that this is used only in certain situations. Finally, all of the funding factors that I'm about to describe apply to the IAC's two biggest programs, the Capital Improvement Program and the Built to Learn Act. Some may or may not apply to the IAC's other programs. So for example, the most recent round of school safety funding didn't have a local match requirement. The IAC paid up to the eligible amount. So there are nuances even within what I'm about to describe, but in general, this will give you an idea of how each of these programs works. So this slide shows the entire funding factor formula for the new renovation and replacement projects. And I'm going to go through a series of slides that will show each of these individually. So first are the eligible enrollment projections. When an LEA applies for a project, they submit their projected enrollment for the project school. The IAC reviews the enrollments that are submitted, and the agreed upon eligible enrollment is multiplied by the next factor, which is the gross area baselines. The gross area baseline is the amount per student that is eligible for state participation. So you can see in the table on this slide that the amount varies depending on the level of the school, whether it's elementary, middle, or high, and also on the total enrollment. That's to factor in economies of scale. The amounts on this slide don't include community use space or add-ons for special ed or career and technical education. It's important to understand that the baselines are called baselines because this amount is not set in stone. The IAC grants variances from the baseline when an LEA demonstrates that the baseline is not sufficient to support its required educational programs. That is new from when we adopted these baselines in 2018. So far, the IAC has approved 2 variances to date. So the next factor is the IAC adopted cost per square foot. Each year, the IAC adopts a cost per square foot for the upcoming application year based upon recent bid numbers and industry trends. In case you're curious, the current cost per square foot is $358. That's for the building only. I'm actually going to skip a slide to talk a little bit more about this amount per square foot, and then I'll go back. This is on slide 9 or page 47 of the agenda. So for projects that are in certain situations, there are additional factors beyond the cost per square foot for building only that may be applicable. For new projects, site development is added at 19%. For replacement projects, for renovation projects, it's added at 5%. And beginning in fiscal year 2023, the upcoming fiscal year, we're adding 10% for planning, design, and other professional services, and 5% for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So I'm going back to slide 8. The product of these enrollment projects, the projections, the GABs, the cost per square foot, and the other factors is then multiplied by the state cost share percentage. The cost share percentage is established for each LEA every 2 years based upon a formula that uses as its foundation, funnily enough, the foundation program amount with add-ons for other factors such as the level of free and reduced price meals in an LEA, the median household income, the unemployment rate, local growth, and the LEA's outstanding debt and PAYGO funding. This gives you an idea that the formula can be rather complicated. There are a lot of factors that are considered. If there's any interest, we would be happy to do a presentation on this formula later on. For today, I'm just keeping it at a very high level. So now I will briefly review each of the IAC's funding programs before I stand for questions. I know that this is a lot of information. So the capital improvement program has been in place for decades, and until the Built to Learn program was created, it's been the IAC's largest funding program. Applications are received in October, and revisions to those applications are due by November or early December. The LEAs submit their projects to the IAC in priority order. Those projects are vetted for eligibility and for development progress, because the IAC has always wanted to give funding to projects that's going to be able to be used in the fiscal year in which it's allocated. The IAC roughly targets a total LEA allocation based upon the LEA's 10-year average and proportional enrollments, but exceptions are made in this program to support whole projects. The appropriation for project applications that the IAC receives this October, this month, will be approved in the budget in the 2022 session. So that timing drives the IAC's approval schedule. The IAC is statutorily required to make CIP approvals in increments, as you can see on this slide. 75% of the anticipated funding in December, 90% of the governor's preliminary budget before March 1st, and then final approval of the full amount after May 1st when the budget is complete. On this slide, you can see that timeline that I just described, and you can see that this process spans more than a whole year. So at any given point in the year, the IAC staff and the LEAs are working on some portion of their capital improvement program.
I'll make a comment on that slide. That very importantly, with the regional managers that the commission now has that go out and visit with the LEAs every couple of weeks, we're trying to push this back a couple of years to the left so that that early planning, what might be coming, is built into a pipeline. It helps us to align the available resources and get into agreement before it ever comes into the process. Thank you.
Okay. Next is the Built to Learn program. It was enacted in February of this year, and applications occur for this program on a rolling basis. There is a project cost minimum of $4 million, as we discussed at the beginning of the meeting. And for this program, the statute did prescribe specific allocation percentages for 6 LEAs. The other 17 LEAs share the remaining percentage, which is 11.5% of the total bond proceeds. For those of you that like to do math, you might have noticed that that's only 23 LEAs when there are 24 in the state. Prince George's receives its funding for a separate P3 program rather than for these Built to Learn projects like the other LEAs. The projects under this program are approved by the IAC and are then executed by the Maryland Stadium Authority and by the LEAs. The program is just getting started and things have been in flux as we've rolled it out. So I do want to remind everyone that there is on the IAC webpage or website an entire page dedicated just to the Built to Learn program that is constantly evolving as more information becomes available. Again, that is mdschoolconstruction.org. We also have a sign up on our website that allows individuals to subscribe to various topics of interest, and Built to Learn is one of the topics that can be selected. So I would really encourage LEAs and members of the public that are interested in following along with the Built to Learn progress to go to our website and sign up for those updates.
Cassandra, and next month, we are going to bring to the commission a log of all the projects that you have approved and what the expectations are. And then it will evolve into a project status report that's very similar to the one that you've seen for the 15 million on the HVAC projects. So that monthly we'll be reporting on every one of those projects and how they're doing. We'll eventually expand this into all of the CIP projects. Thank you.
Okay. On this slide, you can see the life of a Built to Learn project. The IAC supports the LEAs as they go through project planning, The project is handed off to MSA to support the LEA through the design and construction of the project. And then after the project is closed out, the IAC works with the LEAs on the post-occupancy evaluation and on project reporting. So those are the IAC's two biggest programs. I'm going to really quickly talk about a handful of our smaller programs. The Aging Schools program is a statutory program that totals $6.1 million per year, and the allocations to each county are prescribed by statute, as you can see in the table on the right of this slide. The IAC staff reviews the projects for eligibility and brings a report of the projects done by the LEAs to the IAC at least annually. Next is the School Safety Grant Program. This program began in FY 2019. It's used for security improvements, things like secure doors, areas of visual refuge, surveillance systems, etc. The state share did apply to some rounds of this program, but the IAC elected in the more recent rounds of the program to not apply the state share to these projects. So these are funded up to the approved amount 100% by the state. Anything over that approved amount, the locals do pick up. The Healthy School Facility Fund is open for applications right now, and it provides funding for projects like air conditioning, heating, air quality. It's notable that the program was amended during the 2021 session to include roofs as an eligible category. Those weren't eligible before this year. So IAC staff is currently vetting project submissions, and those projects will be brought to you for approval at your next meeting in November. Finally, the IAC is also responsible for two programs for non-public schools. These are small programs. Typically, they're about $3.5 million per year. The first program is non-public safety, which is for the same kinds of safety projects that we do fund in public schools. And lastly, the non-public aging schools program, which is for any repairs that need to occur. To participate in either of these programs, the schools must be participating in MSDE's textbook program, or they must be non-public special education schools. That was a lot of information that I went through very quickly. It is on the website and will be on the website if anyone wants to review. And there are pages on our website for every one of these programs if anyone wants more information. And of course, we would be happy to do a deeper dive for the members at any point if there are any questions about a particular aspect of what I've covered. And with that, Mr. Chair, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Cassandra. Very comprehensive in a short period of time, and I appreciate you preparing this for us. I think a lot of us, we forget about this information. Any questions about Cassandra's presentation? Ms. Eberhardt?
Yes, first, I think it was excellent. It was really very helpful to get a picture of all the programs. The one thing that this didn't have, which I'm sure is on the website, is how much money the state gives to each of these programs each year. So I think that would be helpful for me to see, like the Build to Learn is over 5 years. The CIP is each year we get an additional amount. So, and maybe if it's just not this year, but we could see where it's been for the past couple years, might pull everything together for me to understand it a little better.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and we do have a great chart that shows the allocations to each program year over year. I can send that to the members after this meeting, and we can include it in the agenda for the next meeting.
Great,
Good.
thank you.
Any other questions on Cassandra's, Mr. Superintendent?
Can you, in a follow-up, not in the very next meeting, but I want to understand the cost share formula more and see how that works. And actually maybe using an example would be good in the presentation. So I'd like to see how that plays out and how those things are weighted and such.
Yeah.
And all I can say is I'm new, so I'm requesting it as someone who's new. So is
Well,
Terry.
I think a lot of us think we know more than we know.
Yeah, yeah.
We
Me.
would be happy to do that, Superintendent. And actually, the vast majority of the information that we receive comes from your staff. Steve Brooks in particular really helps us with that every year. So he has a great presentation he's done, and we will work with him to get something on the agenda for you all.
Yeah, why don't we do that next month if we can? I think it'd be good to do something each month at 5 or 10 minutes to.
I think that would be
inform
good.
us.
And in that information that you're going to send, that Ms. Eberhardt shared, I guess the answer to this question will be there. I'm curious on the non-public school aging, how much money is actually given out and allocated for that, for those schools. I'm just curious how much money that looks like. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you again, Cassandra. It was nice. Any other issues anyone wants to bring up? Okay, I just had two announcements. One, in talking with the superintendent and our attorney general, I've asked Secretary Churchill to chair a committee, an ad hoc committee, to develop criteria for Bob's evaluation each year. It's something we should be doing as a board in total, not just the chair. So Secretary Churchill will be calling, maybe he already has, a couple people to help out with that. Also, Ms. Eberhardt is a volunteer to chair an ad hoc committee regarding bylaws for how we shall function. So she may be calling somebody also to help out with that. So unless there's any other questions, so I hear a call that we for the meeting to adjourn. So Mr. Gibbons moves. Her second.
Second.
Mr. Superintendent, all in favor that we adjourn, please say aye. Opposed? Okay, we'll see you next month. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, members. Goodbye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.